So, I recently woke up to a pretty big glaring aspect of my narcissism. And I'll be honest, I was pretty embarrassed because, I'm out here on the internet talking about how it's possible to heal and how so many of my symptoms have gone away. And I actually, devolved quite a bit this last month. And I came out the other end of it, kind of beaten up, but I've also picked up two really big insights as to why that de-evolution happens. And I think it happens really often in the narcissistic healing journey. So stick around. This is kind of a crazy story, how it all came together. So first I want to say that when I got back from my ayahuasca trip, I felt amazing. Before ayahuasca, I had already had some really impressive improvements to my narcissism. I was showing up very empathetically. I would wake up in the morning, thinking about Kira and just would remember to just ask her. And I was just interested in her, all automatically through building my empathy. And I also just would remember things that she needed. This is a funny little trait about narcissists is we struggle to pick up the treat for our partner when we're out or do the things that they ask us to do in the way that they ask them because we're kind of up here in our heads. And so I was like, whoa, those symptoms are just literally gone and out of my body, And, so I was feeling really positive about my healing journey. And then I went to ayahuasca and it felt like I blew the top off of it. I came back from that having had the most amazing experience, but having made huge shifts in my body. Immediately, Kira and I would have these conversations that would normally put us into an argument. And I just was not defensive, not offended. We just cruised through them. And it was absolute bliss for months. And I thought I was excited about where I'd gotten to. And and then we had our first little bit of a real fight. And essentially as Kira started to feel more safe, she also started to process her resentment and her issues from the relationship. And she started taking up a little bit more space. She handed over more of the house responsibilities to me and taking care of the kids, which I gladly took on. And I gave up certain things for her as well. And I stopped doing cannabis just because I wanted to love on her. And so two things were happening. One, I was much more invested in the relationship. And then two, she was starting to pull away her energy a little bit and give back to herself because she was doing the work of 15 assistants, always taking care of my emotions before they would even show up, which I think is really common in loved ones of narcissists. And so as she is starting to pull away a little bit, I started to get triggered. And it actually triggered this feeling of neglect, and the neglect from my childhood where, I had a father who wasn't in the house and a mother who had chronic pain and needed to use opioids to get by. And, in a poor home I was 6 of 7 kids. So I truly experienced neglect emotionally and just physically. And that wound was getting triggered by the silliest things. There was 2 different events where Kira didn't want to share something with me. She had been investing time into herself and making these meals. And she made this sauce that was just absolutely amazing, edamame and I can't even remember, turmeric and stuff. But I went to have some and she was like, whoa, don't eat it all. And I kind of got offended. And I was I'm not going to eat it all, but why can't I have some if I wanted to have some? And it turned into this fight. And we actually happened twice. It was the same wound getting triggered, this neglect wound. And at the time I thought, well, it's just found a new wound. We're getting deeper, more emotionally deep. And there's this new thing, it's fine. I'll figure it out. And, there's a few other things that were kind of happening. She ran into an ex-boyfriend and she hadn't had closure in this relationship. She had not, and so meeting him was kind of destabilizing for her and she wanted to have that closure and I wanted her to have it too, but it triggered a lot of old wounds in me from previous relationships where I had been cheated on by someone who was with their ex cheating on me. So I thought that these things were all just isolated issues because of the unique wounds, and I just had like a new chunk of work to do, but they actually were all tied to the exact same issue or set of issues that was actually causing me to devolve in my healing process. Like I was actually showing up much worse in the relationship and not understanding why. And then I had this like crazy realization, and I'll tell you that story. So, I'm noticing that I'm more insecure, and I thought to work with this shaman that I didn't know super well, but to do a psychedelic journey, because psychedelics have been really, really helpful for me, because I believe that the ego is where narcissism exists. It's the part of our brain that's connecting the dots between our life experience and like telling the story. And us narcissists are a fantastic storyteller, dreamers that are always crafting the story. And what psychedelics do, the biggest thing they have in common is that they all shut down the ego, the default mode network, and they get our brain to pause and just to be able to look at things differently out of that storyline. So, I was eager to work with, again, a psychedelic, and I do this all legally through the Native American Church here in Utah. And so he comes to my house, and haven't really worked with this guy before. And I want to preface this story with, the story itself might not be actually true, but it's all symbols. Like these medicines teach us through symbols. They allow us to see things in ways that are for our good. So don't get too hung up on the exact story, but more how I was experiencing it, because that's where the lesson is. So this guy shows up, and it starts off a little bit weird. He's kind of like pushing on me as he's like playing music, because he's doing it live, it's just me and him in a room in like a sacred space, and he's playing his drums and doing these things. And I started I wasn't agreeing with certain things that he said. And I noticed that I felt that it made him uncomfortable. And then he would like ask me to do more medicine. So I did more medicine. And then I kind of had this feeling like he was performing for me. Like he was trying to, look good in front of me. And so I kept kind of asking, I don't know that I agree. And he'd be like, well, try to get me to take more medicine. Okay, take more medicine. And I kind of was like, I think he just wants to get me super high. And then, I'll be susceptible to anything he wants to do to me. And he, there were some other kind of like weird things that went on. And I just kind of, what I ended up doing was I stopped disagreeing with him and just would like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, you're right. You know everything. You're right. And then he stopped telling me to keep taking more medicine. His whole energy shifted. He was like, oh yeah. And like, I had this weird feeling that he was like this cult leader guy that was like trying to like hypnotize me with his eyes and get me to like do these things. And so I ended up just kind of like lying about my experience and being like, wow, yeah. Oh, you healed me. Oh, this was great. Thanks. And then I was like, well, I kind of need to go. Or, I've got a flight tomorrow and I gotta get going. And he was like, oh no, like what? And he was kind of taken off guard by that, I think. And so he was trying to essentially keep me in the room. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like I need to go up and like, I need to go upstairs. Maybe I'll pack. He's like, well, his partner and Kira were kind of together, and, he's like, well, they're not done yet. How about, we just keep doing more. And I said, no, I'm just getting stressed about this flight tomorrow. I really have to pack. And he just like would not let me leave. And I had to like pretend that I was having a panic attack. I had to be like, oh, I don't want to have a panic attack. I've never had panic attacks before. But I said this just to get out of the room. And he's like, oh, do you want me to come upstairs with you while you pack? Would that be cool? And I'm like, no, I'm okay. And so I get up there and I was like a little freaked. I'm like, well, that was weird. I think because, at some point in the journey, I was convinced he was a narcissist. I was like, I think this guy's a narcissist, and I might be right. And maybe that was my intuition, but I don't really care, to be honest, because the lesson I got was the right lesson. So I'll keep going. And The fact he would not let me out of the room was such a weird, bizarre. Like I've worked with a lot of shamans before in medicine women, and they are always allowing you to have your experience instead of kind of inserting what they think it should be or inserting themselves on it. And so I get out of there, and the guy comes up to my room a few minutes later, knocks on the door. Hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I just need some space. Well, they're not going to be done for like a while. Should we just hang out up here? And I was like, I already told you no. I was like, I didn't say that. I was like, oh no, I'm okay. I'm just getting anxious. And like, anyhow, he kept engaging with me, and the guy would not leave my house. And so, we're all downstairs talking at the end. I was like trying to get them to leave. It was such a overwhelming experience to feel like this guy was just not listening to me at all. And so we're there, and I'm thinking, we need to never talk to these people again. Like, these guys are bad news. Like, he's just trying to get people high and like control them or something, and I'm just like kind of on edge, and I'm trying to tell her this kind of like, I'm just trying to get them to leave. And she's like, why are you being like that? And so it was actually quite scary. Like, my heart was racing as I was having to like fake it in front of him and in front of Kira and act like we had a great time when really I was just kind of like scared. And this guy wasn't trying to do anything to me. He just like, I felt controlled. And, the night got over, and she was like, what was that? And I just told her like my experience, and I just felt like he was really trying to control me. And, so she was, and I was just telling her how scary it was. And when I was up there, I had this, when I was alone before we kind of ended it, I had this realization that like, this is what people who are with narcissists feel like. The love of a narcissist who has to lie just to get the narcissist to stop fighting them, just to get them to leave them alone or let them do the thing. And so it kind of becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where the narcissist gets lied to and they think, oh, I can't trust you, but it's because they were being so controlling. And I truly felt the fear that it is. And I sobbed for a while. I was still on the medicine, and I sobbed for a while and was like, I can't believe how I probably made my ex feel. I get a lot of hate on the internet. A lot of people are like, narcissists are the worst, they're demons. And I just think, wow, what hateful people. And now I'm like, no, I get it. If you had to live through being controlled like that and dominated over and over and over again, every time you touch this person's insecurity, I would feel the same way. And I sobbed because I finally understood what they go through. And I personally feel, my belief is that the universe gave that to me. The universe wanted me to know, if I'm going to be working and helping people in this arena, just what that feels like to be with someone who is so forceful and dominating, controlling that you have to like lie to get out of it. And so I'm telling Kira about this, and she looks at me and says, you do this to me. I'm like, you mean like I did that to you? She's like, you still do that to me. And she was like really uncomfortable. I think something in her felt safe to tell me that. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I mean, these last fights that we've had, how did they end? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, in the first one, you said, okay, well, if you're not going to help me with my emotions, I'm not going to help you with your emotions. She's like, that was a threat. You were trying to threaten me, and then I had to succumb at that point, and then we got through the fight. You were dominating me. You were controlling me. It's like hard to see yourself like that. And it's like that juxtaposition of seeing him and then seeing myself. And then, one of the other fights we had the next morning, I was just super triggered and scared that this was going to end up just like my ex. And she was going to trick me and deceive me. And I was going to be taken advantage of, and she would take my money and all this stuff. So I said, I think, before we get married this summer, marriage is a few months away, I was like, I think I would feel safer if we signed a prenup. And again, this was different because it wasn't control in the fight, but it was control of the whole situation. It wasn't a surrender into love. It wasn't a trusting the other person and being like a mutual like companionship. It was like, I want to be the boss. I want to be in charge. Right. And ultimately we came out of that, and I felt that was the wrong decision, and we got to that, but she's like, you still tried to control me in that moment. And in another fight, I think this was the sauce fight, I started to bring up how unfair it was that she was, that she gets to spend all day cooking and doing things that she loves, and I'm working, and I provide financially for her, and I pay for everything, and I should be able to have sauce if I want to. And she was like, that was an act of control. She's like, I'm vulnerable. Like, if I had to leave tomorrow, I have nothing to my name. You take care of me in every way. Financially, that is like, holding that over my head is so scary. And we'd already had this conversation, but she was pointing out the control aspect. And that was the common thread that I had not connected the dots on. That when I get scared, I try to control. And all narcissists do this. I've read this everywhere, and I just, for some reason, hadn't seen it in my own life. But from there, that literally the next morning we wake up, and we're up super late. The next morning we wake up and we've got a trip to Denver with some friends to go see a show, a music, concert. And we get on the flight, and I'm just like seeing all the ways that I've done this. And I'm really insecure with these friends because, I'm not going to go into the details as to why, but I'm really insecure about the guy in this other couple. And I just, like, for some reason think Kira likes him more than me, and that I need to be more like him. And that weekend was such shit. Like, because I didn't get any sleep, like I wasn't getting sleep. I was seeing how controlling I was, and it kept coming up. I kept having these memories of how I'd done it to my wife. And it was like, it's like I stayed in the medicine for like the whole weekend. Like, I was just having this like spiritual, but like gut wrenching experience, seeing everything that I had done. And the littlest thing set me off. We had a handful of like little fights over like the yogurt, and then another one over like, I can't even remember. She was in the bathroom too long. Like, I was so deeply insecure. And I saw my pattern trying to play out. We'd get in these arguments, and I'd see my mind being like, get up and walk out. That'll show her, because that would trigger her, or I could hear my mind wanting to say something about financial support or something about how unfair this is. But it's like, it's this desire to take over the conversation and to like be in charge. And, we got back from that weekend, and we got home, and at this point I just felt so much shame for not, being who I thought I was. Like, I thought I was like, wow, I've healed so much. I'm this guy who helps people on the internet, and, I have a whole bunch of clients that I'm helping on their journeys. And I'm like, wow, I just felt ashamed for not being the person who I thought I was, who I'd been putting myself up to be. And our fights got worse, even over the dumber things. It's like, in Denver, I could have understood it, because it's like I was dysregulated by the friends and the no sleep, and this boyfriend thing was still happening like throughout it. I was like, okay, but coming home was like still kept happening with like some of the dumbest things. And then I had two things that really helped me. Well, let me back up. Why is it then that in, one situation I was never defensive, fully trusting, fully like a great partner, no conflict. And then what changed between now and feeling all this stuff was just happening. And it wasn't just all the situational things that were going on. It was something that had changed in me. And I pieced it together throughout this whole fever dream of a weekend and week after. But I had stopped trusting her. Trust was a massive message in one of my ayahuasca nights. And I actually talked about it in one of my videos. I went really deep into how trust was like a big lesson that ayahuasca gave me. And what I noticed was that at some point I had like developed this like kind of tiny mini story of like, well, what if Kira's actually trying to get me to do all these things so that she can like betray me and like take my money, And it's like, I let that belief exist as like a backup belief. Like if if she doesn't actually love me, then this is it. And it's like, so I didn't walk through the world that way. I didn't act every day like she was that. Every day I was like, I love her. I trust her. She's great. But I had this like sneaking little voice of, well, why is she doing that? You know, I'd like walk up to her and she'd be on her phone and she'd put it away as I walked up to her, and my mind would go, she's texting somebody, which is a wound that I've had. And, oh, what if she's texting? What if she's, and I just kind of like slowly had like it's almost like I had a little note in the back of my brain that was like, puts away phone, you know, asks me to do more stuff, doesn't share her stuff, you know, and it's just like, I just had this little tiny backstory of like, I can't fully trust her. I can't fully release into her. And this is a big thing that I learned, is that like trust is so crucial to narcissists. We chose validation. We chose control and power over trust and love at some point in our lives. And it's like that neural pathway is really fiercely ingrained in me, to this autopilot of not trusting, of thinking I'm not safe. And what I have been doing actually even since Denver was just like, literally, it's like an energetic, just like trust, like just, it's like a relaxing into her. My brain would say, ooh, is she doing this deception thing? And I'd say, no, she's not. Trust, 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 trust. So I kept doing that over and over, and the fight started to go away. And so that's something that I'm going to take home and take into my life and the people that I'm helping, is like noticing that you can autopilot into not trusting, and that will reshape the way you're seeing the world and bring back your symptoms, your narcissism. The other thing was that narcissists have this autopilot to believe that they don't have a problem, to believe that they're healed, to believe they didn't have a problem to begin with. I mean, I experienced this before I knew about my narcissism. After my divorce, I got into therapy, and it only lasted like 2 months, because the guy helped me and I just kind of convinced myself I had been done. Like, wow, I healed it all. We're good. And he was like, no, you should not stop therapy. I'm like, I'm done. I'm healed. Thank you. Bye. But I threw myself into like chasing women and chasing power and all the other coping mechanisms you can imagine. I was not healed from that thing. And I've seen this in my clients, where they kind of come to this belief of like, oh, I've done it. I'm done. Here we go. Because they start to see improvements. They start to see, whoa, I'm more empathetic. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And the narcissistic mind will trick us into believing, yeah, you're healed. You got it, buddy. Good job. You know, and we can keep these behaviors going. You know, I had one client who was like, I am so glad I'm done. I'm healed. And literally in the same breath, I could see like 15 signs of him, you know, shifting the blame, acting above his partner, like doing all these things. And it was like, whoa, this is such a tricky thing. And I had one other person just this week tell me that he had tricked himself into thinking he didn't have narcissism, which is something I did too. And, you know, even though the score showed him on the NSS, you know, high in narcissism, and he said, nah, I probably don't, probably not. And it's like that tricky. This is why this is such a hard, you know, condition to work with. So that autopilot was another like amazing learning, you know, thing I want to like take home and work with. And then the other one was how I allowed shame to creep back in. Like, because I had been so ashamed of like not being the person who I thought I was, and not being able to withstand, you know, Kira's frustrations or whatever, I was just feeling, it made me more insecure overall. So that was another part of the process. Like, I spent like an afternoon and I like just did like I wrote a letter to myself that was like reaccepting myself. Like, dude, I see you as you are. It's okay that you get emotional. It's okay that we've taken this big step backwards. It's okay that, you know, whatever. And I felt literally like that night, Kira brought something up and it didn't bug me at all. I just went over. The next morning, same thing. I'm like, okay, I think this is having its effect too. So, yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but I think narcissism really is something that's similar to alcoholism, that I will have these mental traits, these automations, probably forever in my brain. And it's my job to just keep an eye on them and like know how to try and rewiring. Because I mean, that wiring has happened for decades. I have decades of mental wiring, not trusting, controlling, not being vulnerable. Like these are not being empathetic. These are all like automations. And I'm still working on some of these, being vulnerable, still struggle with it. Now that I'm aware of the control, better. Now that I'm aware of the trust, better. But I don't think I'm out of the woods yet. But that's okay. I want to fully understand this problem because I want so badly to help people who have been in this like shitty fever dream of a condition that makes you feel crazy and makes you feel like you're the worst person in the world and has you so confused as to why you're even doing it to begin with when you like love these people. So when they say that narcissists are controlled by demons, it's like, it does kind of feel that way sometimes. It's like, why did this happen? So, I hope that you find this helpful. I hope that, you can see yourself in this journey. If there's something you want to share, I'm here for it. I truly want to give access to people who are trying to heal or to give understanding to the loved ones of narcissists, because this is an extremely difficult, complex problem that I've dedicated like my full time to over the last year trying to figure out. And I think that people need all they can get. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. See ya.